Welcome to Love and Hustle. We share unfiltered stories of marriage, entrepreneurship, and scaling to seven figures without losing sight of what matters most.
The raw, the real, the sacrifices, and the lessons learned the hard way.
This is Love and Hustle. Welcome back to Love and Hustle. I'm Brittany, and this is the podcast where couples, companies, and chaos collide. This will be the first episode without Zach, and I am so excited to deep dive into something that is very specific to the photography industry. Doesn't really so much apply to a lot of the stuff that Zach works with in my business, and I am so excited for today's episode. I actually have this recorded in my mastermind. It's a little bonus recording because without fail, I always end up talking about this topic during the course that I decided to actually just record it for them where they can go and listen to it outside of our classes because our classes are so rich with content. And this is something that it doesn't apply specifically to only my business model. It applies to any business model. And so I'm so excited to bring this topic to you guys today. We're going to be talking about over-delivering and how over-delivering actually can backfire on you as a business. Don't get me wrong, I am a girl of under-promise and over-deliver, and that is something that we try to work into every single thing that we do within our business, with the exception of our galleries. And I'm going to be deep diving today into the topic around your digital gallery, your images, the curation of your work, and how over-delivering in that space can actually hurt you if it's not done well and it's not done with intention. So let's jump to it. Now, if you're listening to this podcast and you don't run a business that sells products, I want you to stay here because this conversation is still going to apply to you. If you run a business that maybe includes some digital files, but not all digital files, I like to call that semi-inclusive. This is also going to apply to you. If you sell collections, this will apply to you. And of course, if you run a business model like mine, the value-based model, this also is going to apply to you. So let's jump in. Okay, so I kind of want to talk through over-delivering, and I think for most people, that's something that they want to do for their clients. They want to go above and beyond. They want to give more than what it was that they said that they would do. And I think it is a great thing to always do that. Like I said, we try to over-deliver in every aspect of our client's experience. However, it can backfire on us if we don't do it strategically. So let's first talk about digital images, the business model that is operating with a focus on digital files. Now, I know, and everyone listening here is going to probably agree, that the process of curating and creating a gallery of images, the hardest part of that is not the editing. It is the culling process. And that culling process is a huge time. It's like the huge chunk of time in that spectrum of I've shot the session, here are my raw images, and getting to the destination of the curated gallery of images at the end. We all know that the bulk of that work between point A and point B is the culling of that, okay? If you are a happy shooter and you click away and you rapid fire and you're shooting multiple frames per second and you're coming out of a session with over 1,000 images, that gets harder, okay? I have learned to slow down over the years to actually, I flip between my settings when I don't need to be rapid firing versus I have people who are moving very quickly, and I need to make sure that I nail my focus, and I will do several shots per second. I'll sometimes up my frames per second in those types of scenarios, but I always remind myself, hey, wait, go back to single shot, and getting that slower and not rapid firing, right? So I try to remind myself to do that because I know that I'm going to actually penalize myself on the back end when I'm culling. And so I know that for everybody here listening, you get that, okay? You know that the more frames you walk away with from that session, the more work you're going to create for yourself on the back end. But here's the thing that happens in that, okay? Whether you walk away with 300 photos or 1,000 photos, as you are going through them, the intention behind your work is so important, right? We want to deliver the absolute best quality images. We want to create a gallery that speaks so highly of what it is that we do. However, I think that there's this misconception that if I give somebody 100 images or 200 images, whatever it is, that you somehow gave them more just purely based on quantity. And while yes, you did that, you actually do a disservice to yourself as the photographer in that. I'm going to give you guys an example. So when we got married, we used an incredible photographer, love them dearly, and I love our images. However, when I received our gallery of photos, I think that there was around 1,500. And from having coached dozens of wedding photographers, I've heard that there can be quite a range, anywhere from, like 800 up to thousands. And obviously it depends on like the type of wedding you're having, how many guests you're having, of course, 100%. However, I remember when I received these images and I was flipping through them, I became really disappointed. And I was going through and I'd be like, okay, that's good. Kind of like that. That one's great. Meh, meh, meh. That one's okay. That's good. Don't really love that one. And before you knew it, the number of images that were meh were starting to completely dilute down the ones that were incredible. And I started to get really disappointed in their work. And it was like I almost couldn't see the beautiful images because I started to focus on how much I didn't like and how much was just like not great. That the ones that were beautiful just were kind of lost in all of that. And so obviously I went through a process of creating my album. And as I really started to create favorites, I was able to see that there were some beautiful ones. And I started to notice I could actually tell the difference between the ones that were shot by the primary team and the second shooters. There was just a lot more intention. There was a lot more thought that was coming from the principal photographers versus the associate photographers. So when you over deliver in that gallery, you can begin to dilute down the highest quality images. And I know that from the perspective of the photographer, this means working harder. This means spending more time on that curation process. And this means that you have to be more critical. You have to spend more time. And for a lot of photographers who are operating in a digital only model, time is money. That is what you are doing. You are exchanging time for those digital files for a set price. And so there's really no incentive in that situation for a photographer to keep curating, to keep spending more time, to go through the effort of doing head swaps to make the perfect photo happen, right? And so while it can feel like, yes, I got more for my money, you end up getting not necessarily the best work. You end up getting a lot of diluted work. And so when this happens, and clients start to see imagery that feels meh, that feels okay, that feels like it didn't belong in your portfolio, what they start to experience is a loss of trust in you as a business and what it is that you create. That lack of trust starts to unfold into questioning their investment. And this is where you start to see those clients that spiral. I just saw a girl who posted, I don't remember where I saw this. Maybe it was a Facebook group, I'm not sure. But she posted all these screenshots critiquing her photographer. Oh, I didn't like this. Oh, this was in focus instead of that. My arm looks fat here. Oh, this is, I don't like this. Why didn't we fix that? And she started to just literally like in screenshots of this like Google review, just tear this photographer apart. And I was sitting there and I saw validity to what she was saying. Absolutely. Can we be better artists in the moment while the camera's in our hand? Slowing down is so important to be able to do that, right? But in the same sense, as I went through it, I was like, granted, I didn't get to see the whole gallery, but I was like, I bet you there were some really good ones. And I bet this photographer just didn't take the time. Now, she did share what that person they paid. It was less than $3,000 for a full wedding, 80 hours of coverage. And so I was like, yeah, when it came down to culling, I bet you they did not have the room in their profits to spend more time on this. But what ends up happening in that is you end up damaging your brand. You end up damaging the trust of your clients, your reputation, all of those things. And so I feel that it's really important to reflect on how this spills over in other ways. I've had clients sit on my sofa and say, thank you for not giving me more than 100 photos, which I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share, hang tight. I'm going to share with you guys how many images we present in each gallery. And it's not near 100. But I've had clients thank me. And I've also had clients pull up their galleries and just nitpick them just like this person on Google. And just like I did with my wedding photographer as I was going through them. I have experienced that same feeling. And so if you're operating in a digital only model, yes, your time is money and you need to save, but there's ways that you can be really intentional about this. So if that applies to you, I once ran a business just like that. And so I'm going to share with you a few thoughts. One, slow down, change your settings on your camera to not be walking away with as many images. So if you typically are shooting over 1,000, challenge yourself to get that down to 700. Challenge yourself again to get that down to 500. Our editor has a set number of photos that she can expect from us based on the session type. If it's in studio versus if it's a newborn versus if it's a sunset session. And there has been times where she will come to me and she will be like, hey, so I backed up that card and there was only 300 photos. Does that sound right? Do you remember? And I'm like, oh yeah, that was a great session. I nailed it. I felt really good. I didn't have to shoot that many frames. And so we really try to be intentional and to in the moment, make sure that we're getting quality photos. There are times where we shoot a lot. Yesterday, I handed over my memory card to her and I go, these two are going to be rough. There's going to be a lot of head swaps in order for us to make this one happen. Because I had 3 little boys under the age of 6 in my studio. It was bonkers. And before that, I had a toddler that was very stranger danger and very, very really standoffish to me, the baby, all the things. And so, there's certain circumstances where it is going to be higher, but allowing yourself sort of this range that you operate in based on the overall process of that session, right? And how the results are coming. When there's high wind, I can promise you we're going to be walking away with a hell of a lot more images because we're going to be hoping that we can do head swaps where people's hair is not blowing everywhere. And that's Florida for you. Sometimes it is not windy and then you show up to the session and this is how in Florida it's going to be a rough one. When you get to the session and you see a kite surfer over the dunes and you're like, oh, nope, didn't see those winds at 4:00 when I checked the radar. And that's just Florida for you. So there's certain circumstances where we do have to rapid fire and it is what it is. And we can't control that. But in the circumstances you can, do it. Change your settings, okay? Be mindful of the circumstances, okay? Number 2 of what I want you to do is, so you're not only going to have fewer images, but if you are not using an AI software that will help you in that culling process, I want to really challenge you to do that. I know that AI, there's a lot of gray area in it from the perspective of being an artist, right? But these softwares can really shortcut us to honing in on the imagery that is in focus, that and allows us to cluster the images into, hey, of these 15 photos, these were the best 5 based on quality, okay? Based on eyes being open, based on focus, okay? There is software that allows you to do that. And then when it comes to the actual client's experience, you really have to articulate what it is that you're going to deliver for that client. And so if you are not going to be able to have the time because of what you charge to do head swaps, to do all of those meticulous edits, like what I'm talking about with people's hair flying or whatever, or maybe there's some distracting objects in the back that you just couldn't remove, but you just don't have the time within what you charge, okay, in your profitability to go be super intentional like that and to be very detailed. If you do not have that, you need to make sure that you're articulating that on the front end to your client, because when people get that gallery and they start to express disappointment, you don't want that to be held against you. And so if you're communicating that up front with your lead or client saying, hey, these are things that are to be expected, and these are things that are optional to have modifications. So if you are going to charge $25 for a head swap, if you are going to charge an editing fee for removing just distracting objects, because that's not part of your process, you need to make sure that you're articulating that, and that is communicated up front very clearly, okay? I think a lot of photographers bury that into their contract and clients oversee it, and then they get surprised by it on the end and they get really upset and they get really pissed off. Oh, I didn't know this. And it's like, well, it was in your contract. Well, like, let's be honest. How many people actually read the whole contract? Shit. I mean, honestly, guys, excuse my language, but most people don't even freaking read the website. Like, we all know. Clients almost sometimes don't even read the damn emails. It's like, and it's infuriating, right? But if you're going to put it in your contract, make it where they have to initial it. I understand that detailed edits such as head swaps, skin smoothing, thinning, whatever it is, right? Removal of distracting objects is not included in my digital gallery and is subject to an additional fee. And you don't have to say what the fee is. You can just say that it's subject to a fee, okay? And they have to initial that, but making sure that you're communicating that very clearly up front, okay? So I understand from the perspective of a client that receiving more images is getting more for your money. Okay, so if we were to say a digital images are $1,000 and then we deliver 100, right? Versus if we say digital images are $1,000 and we only deliver 45. To the client, they got more for their money. And so for us as photographers, sometimes we feel like that's a gift. Like we feel like that's being nice. We feel like that's providing value. But remember that value can really backfire on you. It can really damage your brand. It can really hinder the client's experience when it's done in a way that's, really hurting the overall quality of your work. Okay. Now, we also know that clients typically who have a sole focus on only digital images, they are not looking at the client experience. They are literally just saying, I want to show up, you take my photos, and I pay you. Okay. In general, clients who are focused on digital images and solely digital images, not the client experience, not products, not all that other stuff. Okay. In general, those clients do want more for their money. And so I almost feel like in some ways as an industry, we like give in to clients, and we've almost like, I've had people on the phone tell me, oh, how many images do I get in that digital gallery? And I'll tell them, and then they're like, that's it. And it's because they've been working with photographers who are just over delivering and literally focusing on how can I give you as much for your money versus how can I give you the most outstanding work. And so realize that there's also clients who are going to have this mindset of, I want more for my money. And there are going to be buyers who are not interested in quality. They are interested in quantity. So it's also really important to understand like who it is you are attracting, who it is that you're working with, and what it is that they value. This is also something that you could even ask your clients. Hey, in the process of curating your images, are you more interested in which of the following? And ask them, do you want more photos to choose from? Or would you rather have highly curated images? And so allowing for an open dialogue so that you deliver what it is that they are expecting. Now, I will say that as a brand, that's my decision as a business. And we stand very confidently in what it is that we deliver, and we don't waver from that. If a client, obviously, if a client asks for something very specific, but when it comes to our image quantity, we know what we statistically deliver and what we can do within that realm very well. And so if somebody says, well, is there any way that you can give me 150 images? My answer would be hard no, just from the perspective of the business that we operate and what we stand for as a company, which is quality images, not quantity. And so I really make sure to articulate that to a client. If they were to ask something or in and around that realm, I make sure that they understand that you're not going to receive from us a bunch of repetitive images where people's heads are tilted differently. I make sure to tell them that we curate our work to the highest possible level from the perspective of our vision as an artist. And so what you receive from us is the absolute best quality image. And that means we do all of those things in our work. We do the head swaps necessary. We remove the distracting objects. And so keeping those things in mind. Just yesterday, I helped a photographer print her wedding photos. Or excuse me, I helped a client print her wedding photos from their photographer. And she used a very well-known photographer and imagery. But as you started to look closer, she was complaining about some things to me, and I saw her point. It was valid. I mean, there was composition situations that just were not well executed. There were lots of distracting objects, trash cans in the back. There were telephone poles, and these were key shots from the wedding. These were those foundational images that go on to become framed. And so in that, I feel so bad for her, because as I was talking to her, I said, have you ever thought about doing an album? Like, you have all these beautiful candidates. And she's like, no, she's like, Brittany, I hate these photos. Like, I can't see past XYZ. I can't see past XYZ. And I'm just like, man, this is so unfortunate, because literally this is such a missed opportunity from poor curation. And it's like, she literally only had enough that she liked from her session to do a 6-frame gallery with me. And so my heart just kind of sunk for that photographer. And I don't think that this is one of the reasons why I love in-person sales, because in-person sales is a process to actually be critiqued every single time you shoot a session, because without fail, clients will say something about what they liked or didn't like, whether it's about something you did or something about them personally. But it allows you to think like your client, not to think like just the artist, but to think from the perspective of the client. So, and it's one thing, obviously in the wedding world, digital imagery is a huge, is a huge driving force. There's really not a ton of photographers that are doing in-person sales and getting that opportunity to hear clients' feedback. So now, one of the cool things that I experienced when I worked in 2 corporate portrait studios, I worked in one named Sadie's and another one named The Picture People. I got critiqued by my boss in both of those for several months before I was like officially off and shooting independently and all the things. And something that we do in our studio is we do critique each other. We do give each other feedback, because we always want to strive to be our best. And I think it's so great to have eyes on your work. Allow one of your peers to look at one of your galleries and just give you very constructive feedback, and looking at it maybe from the perspective of what clients would say to you, especially if you're not operating in a model that allows clients to verbalize what they love and don't love, allowing somebody to come into your space and help you to improve your work and improve your curation process. Okay, so now I want to talk about semi-inclusive. So this, we operate in our mini sessions. So like Santa, our headshots, we operate in a semi-inclusive model. Now, from the perspective of the core of our business, we don't want to sell just a few digital files. We pour so much work into that gallery. We want our clients to have all of them. And so for us, it's a different it's a different process specifically for our mini sessions, but our mini sessions are also open to the public. They're open to our clients as well, but they're also open to an entire clientele base that isn't interested in the full experience. These mini sessions are distinctly different from everything we do in the core of our business. So the way that it's structured is really speaking to a different audience. It's not speaking to our ideal client. So now, in the semi-inclusive model, what happens is let's say with your session, I should say semi-inclusive, or if you are doing bundles, or if you are doing collections of some kind, okay, where there is options for, let's say, 5 digital images, 10 digital images, 20 all, okay? That's the concept that I am referring to right now. So that would fall into several different models, but semi-inclusive, bundles, collections, those types of things. Where over-delivering backfires in that is that same meh, that one's good, meh. And so clients start to, the more a client says, it's okay, the further away you get from selling the biggest package, right? Now, I do know that some business models have a strategy that they're not trying to sell the biggest one. They're actually trying to sell the middle one because the middle one actually has the highest margin. And this is like this can be a whole nother topic, because there's obviously the strategies that want to sell the item that has the most profit. And then there's also the strategy of selling the items that bring the highest revenue, right? So we can look at this several different ways. And this is where critical thinking and having a coach and really being able to understand strategy. Okay. So, but I don't want to speak to in each individual strategy. What I want to just speak to is from the perspective of a client. And as they are sitting there and they are looking at their gallery, we want to create the best possible outcome, which would mean a client not settling for the 5 images that are included with their session, right? Or for a client to only add on a couple of images. We want to knock their socks off. Like, we want them to be like, holy heck, I can't live without any of these, and they're so good. I need to have an album, right? That's what we want our clients to experience. When I sit down with a client, we go through a favoriting process. And if our client doesn't favorite more than 60% of the photos in their gallery, that makes me question what we did and if we could be better. Okay. I never look at that as an opportunity to be hard on ourselves. I look at that as an opportunity to be better for our clients, right? So that's our goal. There are times that I go through that favoriting process. It actually happens quite frequently. And our clients end up favoriting all but like 2 photos. And I'll be like, okay, wow. So this is where I come in as really their gallery wall designer and their album designer, and I help them hone in on what creates a beautiful gallery. And I ask them very intentional questions of what that looks like for them specifically. But let's go back to the process of semi-inclusive collections, bundles, etc. Okay, when a client is able to pick just a few, the further away you get from that full collection. And here's my thought process. I don't want to sell just in the core of my business. I don't want you to buy just 5. I spent the same amount of time to produce all of the images. So for me, if I spent the same amount of time, let's just hypothetically say 20 images in that gallery. If I spent the same amount of time to spend 20, I don't want you to just walk away with 5. I want you to walk away with all 20, because I still put all the time in all 20. I know some people have these like bundles where they have collections that include all of the files, but then there's these like bundles off to the side. And trust me, I had a model like this. I had collections that were 5, 10, 20 all. And I rarely sold the 5 because it was very expensive for what it was. But when it happened, I was so mad. I was so mad because I had poured so much freaking work into all of those photos, okay? And so we want our clients to sit down and want all of them. And in order for them to want all of them, we can't dilute the work, okay? Now, I did a very interesting, call it a case study on my business. So last year, and I should say 2025, we had our in-house editor for our Santa event, okay? And in 2024, we outsourced it, okay? 2024 was a rough year for us, guys. We got hit by 2 hurricanes right before our Santa event. We had moved, and just before the 2 hurricanes, we had moved into our brand new studio that we completely built from the ground up, essentially. So it was hard. We were in a really hard season. And so I decided that we would outsource Santa. We would get one thing off of our plate. We would relinquish that pressure from us. Well, she did a good job for the most part. However, the curation was not at the caliber that we curate. And it wasn't to say that the curation was bad. It just was sloppy. It was just not done with the attention that we would have done. And so our galleries for that Santa event on average ended up around like 25 on average. And while I think from the perspective of the client, it was like, oh, wow, we get so many more images to choose from. What actually happened is on the back end, we had fewer clients choose to purchase the whole gallery than we did in 2025. Now, in 2025, I sat our editor down and I said, listen, I have a hunch. Last year, our back-end transactions decreased. What I mean by that is the number of people who chose to purchase more images or all of the images had gone down from the year prior, 2023. And I said, so listen, this is your job. Your job is to get those galleries between 10 and 15 photos, okay? And I want the 10 and 15 photos to be distinctly different. And I want there to be at least 5 wow images, okay? And if you have to do a head swap, if you have to, our Santa is a blinker. He blinks constantly. It drives me crazy. Love you, Santa. If you're listening to this, love you, Santa. He kind of knows he's a blinker too. But I'm like, if you have to go find eyes where Santa's eyes are open to make that magical image of that child looking at Santa, you go open Santa's eyes. You go find some eyes, okay? And so it did take a little bit more time per gallery, but we drastically, and when I say drastically, I mean by thousands of dollars, increased our revenue on the back end. And what that told me is that by more intentional curation, by better work, we actually ended up with better sales, with more people walking away saying, I need all of them, than people walking away with saying, I'll just take what was included. So if that type of business model applies to you, I want to challenge you to just go a little bit further, okay? And I know that it takes time, and I know that it can feel like, why am I doing this, right? Why am I spending this more time? You're spending that more time because of the outcome on the end, on the back end, okay? So that's how that's how over-delivering can backfire, right, in those circumstances. So we've talked through a couple of different circumstances. I want to pivot the conversation now into in-person sales and what happens in the actual sales room. And I've kind of touched on it throughout this because I've brought up how we do things, but I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth. I'm going to give you guys some real numbers of what we do in our sales room, okay? Now, we offer 2 different session types. We have our signature session, which is our full service experience. And then we also have an offer that we call a simplicity session. For simplicity's sake, a petite session. I hate using the word mini because mini tends to be associated with events, but it's more of it's for very simple sake, it is half of a session. It is less time. It is fewer images in their gallery. It is a smaller investment, okay? Whereas our signature session is that full service experience where we include all the bells and whistles and all of that. So But regardless, every client who goes through the core of our business goes through an in-person sales process where we meet with our clients. And this is where we truly believe we don't sell to our clients. I actually want to can we just as a community stop calling it in-person sales? Because it's not in-person sales, it's in-person service. It literally is serving our clients. If you are familiar with me, my platform, what it is that I stand for serving people fully. I don't stand for selling. I truly believe that what we do and delivering finished products and sitting down and helping our clients to decide how they're going to enjoy their images is a service, and it is not selling. So in-person service is where we are going to go with that. But when you sit down with your client, if you overwhelm them with too many choices, it leads to indecision. And this is where, for you, as the salesperson, as the person of service, you have to be really good at your job. Okay? And I know, I get it. Sometimes as photographers, one, we think we're doing our clients a favor. Then two, we think that I think a lot of photographers, and this is from having coached so many, they really struggle to make the decision for their client. They really struggle and they think, well, maybe the client will like that smile better than this smile of their child, even though I think that one's better. But what if the mom likes this one better? Nope. You're the artist here. You are the one that is curating that gallery. You are the one that is saying this is the best quality image. And I get that perspective of wanting to give your client as many options. But when you are operating in a process that needs clients to make decisions in and around what it is that they are going to purchase, whether that be printed or otherwise, right? You need clients to make decisions, okay? Now, I want to talk through some of those decisions really quick. If you are offering custom framing, that includes the client's decisions around the design, the client's decision around the images, the client's decision in the molding, the client's decision in the matting. Okay, that is layer upon layer upon layer of decision that you have to. Okay, and so the more concise you can make each decision-making process, the easier it is to close that transaction. And so, yes, we want our clients to have choices, but we don't want to give them so many choices that they kind of just throw their hands up and say, I can't do this, I'm overwhelmed, right? And a lot of times what happens is, and this is from experience of coaching people, when that happens, instead of becoming the guide in that process, you just allow that to be what is accepted of this scenario. And it's really important to still hold control of that process. When a client is getting overwhelmed, even if you only delivered 40 images, you are their guide. You are the person who confidently knows how to walk somebody through all of those decisions, right? Now, for us in a signature session, we will never deliver more than 65 photos. If our editor is sitting and she is like, holy crap, this session was so good, I have 74 photos. She will call somebody into that office and tell them to pick this one or this one, this one or that one, this one or that one. I have 6 family looking at the camera that are all vertical. Let's pick the top 6 family, right? And so we will have another set of eyes come in to be critical, somebody who's fresh in that. We will never exceed 65. We know that if we go over 65, statistically speaking, we will overwhelm the client and we will actually lose our sale entirely. Now, we've gotten really good at it. So, over the years, I've done in-person sales now for 9 years. So I have been able to learn how to manage that process of clients sort of unraveling with the overwhelm, right? But if you're new to sales, that's hard. You don't have those skills. You haven't been doing that long enough. And it's something that takes time, right? So making it easier for you to close that transaction. All right. Now, we tell our clients that we deliver 45 plus images. Okay. We tell our clients that. That would be a worst case scenario if we're delivering 45 photos. That would be like somebody lost their marbles, had a tantrum, and was crying less than halfway through the session. And there was no coming back from it. Okay. In the world of working with toddlers, that can happen. And so one of the things I also do with my clients is my clients will ask me questions like, oh, I have 2 different looks. Which one would you wear first? I always tell my client the one you like the most. We never know if someone's going to lose their marbles. I want you to have the look that you love the most first. Okay. So, and it's just the reality of working with children. I mean, shoot, I have never really shot weddings. And so who knows, maybe those types of scenarios can happen in a wedding. I don't know the circumstances. But making sure that, you're prioritizing your session. And, so the signature session, we want to get to, a minimum of 45. But if it's 45, it was probably a rough session. It was probably a session, or the client was very, very late. That would be another scenario where we might be penalized. Or we had another situation happen this past fall where we were in and around 45. It was an extended family session where we would normally have had 60 to 65 photos, but it started raining. We just had rain move in. The rain was supposed to happen later in the day, and it moved very quickly. And that session got rained out only 12 minutes into the session. And so there's just scenarios that happens, right? But our goal is never less than 45 and never more than 65. I would say that we land in the middle most often, somewhere in that 50, 55 range typically is what we're seeing. Now, I will say the more bodies that are in the photo, the more photos we typically produce, because the more breakdowns that we usually have. However, again, our job is to be as intentional as possible and to create the best quality photos. So that means that if we have to do a head swap in order to take this photo from that's really good to wow, that's amazing, we do it. Because that's what we stand for as a brand. That's what we want when people come into our sales room and they look at their photos. We want them to be like, how did you do this? We want them to just think that we are magic, even if it wasn't magic, even if we didn't create it in camera. We want them to think that we did. So, and that sets like a tone for what it is that we deliver as a studio, right? They don't need to know that we did head swaps to make that happen. We can let them think that their children were just little angels, even though it felt crazy in the moment. They're like, how did you do that? We're like, we just did. Your kids are amazing. I know you thought that it was like, it was crazy, but no, like they did so good. We want our clients to think that, right? And so now certainly we do have a level of authenticity to our brand too, where we will give our clients some good bloopers. We will be like, do you remember when this happened? Oh yeah. And I love it because a lot of our clients will put those bloopers in their album and they really just appreciate it. And I just love seeing how we embrace authenticity, so do our clients, and they're not afraid to print it. And I think there's scenarios that it's acceptable to like slide those in a little bit. So, okay. But again, the more decisions you put in front of your client, the further you move yourself from closing that sale. So it is important that you guide your client through the image selection process in a way that is very concise, in a way that allows them to make decisions confidently, and in a way that you're not overwhelming them before you even get started in that. Okay. So if you are working in the sales room process, I want to really encourage you to curate the best possible gallery, to make as few decisions for your client as you can to allow you to close that transaction. Now, here's the other thing. I talked to some of my students who are alumni in my program, and they're just like, oh, well, like by the time I'm done, designing a gallery, my client's so overwhelmed. Like I feel like I can't even begin to talk about an album. Okay. Here's where I want to suggest some strategy to you. Number one is what decisions are important to the actual transaction. I'll give you an example. So the way that my albums are structured, it doesn't matter what you choose for your cover. You just have to choose your photos. And you also don't have to choose your design. We do that after. So all I need to know is if we're going to do a 30 image album, what are the 30 photos? That's all I need to know in order for you to hand me your credit card and pay me, okay? Same thing applies for my custom framing. Everything is the same. And so I don't need you to choose your molding. All I need you to do is to choose your images. And so do you see how I took framing being that you had 4 decisions, an album would be the images, potentially the design, depending on if you design in person. There's variations of how people do that, but potentially the design, the cover color, the cover material, the size, the debossing or cameo, and then of course what it actually says or the image in it, and then potentially even interior customizations. So we're talking at least like 6 to 8 decisions in and around albums, okay? And so the more that you can include in your price point, the less you actually have to talk about before you close the sale. So one of the beautiful things that I do within my sales room process is I design the gallery wall, I select the images, I select the images for the album, which is 3 decisions. So we have the design, the images within the design, and then the images for the album, okay? So really that's like 3 decisions right there. I close the transaction and then I have the client choose the finishes, because now the pressure's off. Now I'm not pushing them away from I'm not making the finish line further away. I'm bringing the finish line closer to my client. And then I stack those like nitty gritty decisions on the backside after I've actually closed the transaction. Now, you may not be able to do this with how your pricing is, how your products are structured, but it's something to consider. Maybe you're looking at your pricing going into the new year and you're wondering how you can improve things. The opportunity could also be in changing how everything is priced together, and can you move some of those decisions to the back end? The other thing is, if you are not able to get your client, maybe you don't even have time to talk about an album, or vice versa. You don't have time to talk about a gallery because you spent so much time focusing on that one product. I want to really encourage you to become the guide for your client, to really take ownership of like, how are we going to select these photos? And so asking really intentional questions is huge for me. So I'll say things like, okay, you brought me an entire tour of your house. Thank you so much for that. Wow, your home's so beautiful. And there's like at least 8 walls that we could choose from. I'll ask them really intentional questions like, do you want to see your photos every day downstairs? Or do you want them in a more personal area like a bedroom or upstairs? Do you want your guests to see your photos? Okay. And so asking really intentional questions allows you to start to just like eliminate, and really get your client down to 1 or 2 options, and then say, okay, of these 2 spaces, now let's start talking about design. And so the other thing is I love to show my clients sample designs of real installations that I've created for my clients. I have about 3 to 4 different styles of design, which is part of the story wall system that I teach. And so I will help clients understand that there are distinctly different designs, and I'll show them that. I'll say, this is an asymmetric design. This is a clean line design. This is a symmetrical design. This is a mirrored design. When you look at these, which one are you most drawn to? Because they are very distinctly different. And guys, literally 9 times out of 10, clients can choose one. And then that other person usually has 2 that they like, okay? And so really being able to guide, that is what I mean by being the guide for your client, to really hone in their focus rather quickly. And you're not creating noise by talking about things that aren't even of interest to them. Okay. The other really great thing is, like, once you have created the gallery wall, if you've gone through the process of making favorites with your clients, if they favorited, let's say 45 photos and 5 of those photos made the wall, you can very simply say, would we like to put the other 40 images that didn't make the wall into the album? because that's a very great way to just simply choose what goes in that. And if they're like, well, I kind of feel like a few of them feel a little bit similar, like, or maybe you have more photos of one child than the other, you'll go through a little bit of an elimination process side by side. But it's a great way to get your clients closer to that finish line without overwhelming them, right? The favoriting process is huge. I love, love, love this. I teach this process in my coaching program where you go through the process of elimination, guiding your client in all of this. And so all that to say, over delivering can truly backfire on you. However, in all of these scenarios, I hope that illustrating how to do things differently, how to make little tweaks to your process of curation will help to increase your overall client satisfaction and, of course, increase your sales and overall revenue and the outcomes for your business. So thank you guys so much for joining me at this call, and I hope to see you guys on the next episode with Zach. Talk soon. Bye.